Thank you for listening to the BJJBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to help you get the most out of your grappling ability and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BjjBrick Podcast. This week, episode 353, we have an awesome special guest, Daniel Maira. He is a brown belt under Marcelo Garcia, and he's going to drop some knowledge and help every one of us get better at jiu-jitsu. As usual, I have my good friend, Joe Thomas and Byron here today. How are you guys?
Hanging in there, Gary. How are you, man?
I am fabulous. It's great to have a good friend like you, Joe. And
nice. Byron's here, too?
I am present. With the Joe's the mortar that holds this brick wall together.
Yeah, definitely.
He's our common friend, Gary.
Yeah. Our mortar, makes everything strong. And last night, this is being recorded a couple weeks in advance. But last night I was watching Thor, the guy from Game of Thrones, the mountain on Game of Thrones. His name is Hafthor Julius Bjornsson. He's a Icelandic strongman, but I watched him yesterday set the deadlift record, 1,104.5 pounds or something like that. The guy's just a beast. And because I watched that last night and thought it was such a great accomplishment, figured we'd use a quote from him today. So I was Googling some quotes, and I found one I like. Be all in or get all out. There is no halfway, MFers. And he didn't necessarily say MFers, but I'm trying to keep it G13. And, it's I like it. Be all in or get all out. And, I was trying to talk to Byron about that before the show. And Byron's like, well, I don't think I'm really like that. And I was like, well, I'm not like that either. And I know Joe isn't. But when we got guys like Daniel Maira, who wants to win a world championship, we got these people who want to, win the UFC championship. You really do have to be all in if you want to win it, if that's your goal. If your goal is to have fun and do jiu-jitsu and like us old guys, we're probably not going to be all in or get all out because Joe and I are going to break everything and we'll be all out. But if you're like Daniel Maira, you've been training 6 years and, he'd destroy me, who I've been training 18 years, and you want to win a world championship, you're going to be all in. There's no halfway. You've got to, totally train 100% for that end goal that you have.
Yeah. The interesting, and you guys are going to hear this in the interview, but he decided as a white belt that he was going to do jiu-jitsu full-time. Like, that's great. I don't think I could. If I'm coaching somebody and they're training and they're here for 2 months and they're like, I'm going to quit my job, I want to train full time. Hey, slow down a minute, my friend. But that's going all in. That's what the difference is between people that break world records, like this Thor guy did, or people that win world champions, like win those world championships. They're doing something differently than everybody else, or maybe just doing it better. And I really liked. So I interviewed Daniel Maira, and then I interviewed his teammate Nick Salas, one right after the other, and we'll have Nick's interview next week. And they're very close friends and good training partners. And they during this coronavirus thing, they're roommates, so they get to their training, and we didn't really get into detail of their training process, but they're really dissecting positions and techniques, and their learning is what's been the biggest focus on, just expanding their jiu-jitsu knowledge. And it's really amazing to watch or to talk up with these gentlemen as they have, in their words, I think you'll hear it, but taken advantage of this and gotten better jiu-jitsu from this process of being quarantined. Man. So there's two different, some people are high performing athletes in jiu-jitsu or any other sport, and they're taking this time as a break. And then there's Danny and there's Nick, and they are taking this as an advantage. Those are opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yep. Byron, I was just thinking, I was talking about, you, I, and Joe, well, especially Joe and I, because you're still a youngster. But,
Thanks,
I was
Gary.
saying Joe and I, we're not all in. But, Joe and I, we are all in. We are going to train. We're all into jiu-jitsu. I don't train every day, but as you guys know, it's my favorite thing to do. I'm going to find time to train. If my wife's like, hey, Gary, let's go hang out with the neighbors tonight, and it's my day to training, no, I'm all in. I'm not going to miss a training day. I'm watching videos on the side. I just have a different end goal, but even though, my end goal isn't the same as winning a world championship, I guess I am all in. Jiu-jitsu is what I do.
Hey, Gary, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, sir.
I just got to say that today you won the internet.
Oh, man. Coming from Joe, that just made my day.
I'm so glad you revisited that, because that's what I thought when you said that. If you can only go 2 days a week because that's all time and your body will allow you to go, that's fine. But be all in when you're there.
Yeah. Yep.
Be attentive, put out your best effort. So you won the internet today, Gary.
Yeah. And it's just a different thing of all in. I mean, I'm not going to train every day. My body couldn't take it. I know my limitations at 53 years old. I'm not going to win a world championship. I'm not going to, fight in the UFC. But
not with that attitude, Gary.
But like Joe said, I'm going to get better every day. And I was having a talk with somebody about this the other day, and they didn't realize my age. They thought I was much older. Actually, they thought I was younger.
Looks.
Yeah. But we started talking about it. Is there going to be a time, because they thought I would have been better as a 45-year-old than I am at 53, and I was like, man, I'm 50 times better at 53 years old than I was at 45. I'm better at 53 than I was at 52. I may not be as fast, but I'm better. But I know we've talked about this before, but I just wonder if there's going to be a time, I wonder if there is, where I start degressing. I'm still not going to stop. I'm still going to be all in, as Joe said, every time I show up. But
Gary, there may be a time where your performance, if you're really comparing on the mat performance, starts to decline, but you'll still be a better coach, a better mentor, a better training partner. There's so many ways you can still be better, even if your physical abilities are declining. Like if the 56-year-old you could not beat the 55-year-old you, that doesn't necessarily mean that the 55-year-old you is better. There's other ways that you improve.
Joe,
he already gave it to you. You can't give him the internet award, although he does deserve it better.
I can. Let me bring the show in today, Byron, so I can give out another internet award.
Man,
so people want it.
You know how upset the whole world's going to be when they find out that we've been the ones that have been in charge of who wins the internet?
And we're just handing the trophy back and forth every week.
Yeah. So let's let the guy who hasn't won the internet talk, Joe.
Byron, what's up?
Hey, nothing. I don't have anything smart to say. I tried to use it all during the interview processes. But I know that Joe has a off the mat lesson that we could drag onto the mat. I'm hoping, where he probably wins the internet yet again.
We're gonna wing this, guys, like we do every week. But if you've listened to the show for any length of time, and both Byron and Gary know that playing guitar is one of my other hobbies, and I played a little bit when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and I'm 53 now. Then somewhere along the line, 22, 23 years old, I got into snowboarding, a few other things, working, and I got rid of all my guitar gear. I don't know if I gave it away, sold it. I don't even remember. But about the time I turned 30, I thought I'd like to get into this again. So I told my wife, I said, I think I'll buy a guitar and an amp. And I bought a new guitar, but bottom of the price range. It was what I could afford at the time. It's a Washburn, pretty nice guitar, but like I say, entry level. And throughout the years since then, last 23, 24 years, there's been times where I've had 3 or 4 electric guitars and other times where I've been down to 1 or 2. But I still have that original guitar that I bought. And currently hanging on my wall, I've got that $150 guitar, and then I've got one that's worth a lot more than that. And I find myself playing the old guitar as much or sometimes more than I play the newer guitar. And I have thought to myself, why would you like this old? It's a junker by now. You know, it was cheap to begin with. I've had it for almost 30 years, 20 some odd years. And it comes down to, I thought about this recently. I picked it up and thought, man, I like this guitar. And you know what? It's just really comfortable. Like, it fits me well. I've been playing it so long that I'm so familiar with the weight, the way it's balanced, the way it fits my body. I mean, it's really comfortable. And I was thinking about like jiu-jitsu techniques. If you've been doing jiu-jitsu for any length of time, you've probably been really good at something and then moved away from it. But don't hesitate to revisit that, because sometimes there's a reason why you liked that at some point. It fit your body type, it fit your grappling style. You know, the thing about this guitar is it's really compatible. It doesn't do a lot well, but it plays heavy metal pretty well. It's got a high gain pickup in it.
That's the most important thing.
Well, it does one thing really good, and that just happens to be the one thing that I do okay at guitar. And so there may be a position that other people think is limited, but if it fits your body style well, if that's what you're good at, then don't be afraid to play that game, even if other people think it's not great. So I'm not sure where I'm going with this, guys, but I'll say the last thing is that this guitar is, I took the volume pot, I took the tone pot, I took the selector switch out of it, I tore 3 pickups out of it, and I put 1 high gain pickup in it. So it's it's kind of a Frankenstein guitar, but it's what works for me. And I think that's how it is with jiu-jitsu. You find something that's comfortable, something that's compatible, and something that works well for you, and that's the game you play.
I have no idea what you were talking about with all the guitar parts.
Oh, yeah, but we can talk 3.5 hours about fire trucks.
Well, we can do that. No, Joe, I like the idea that this thing is made for heavy metal. Would you describe your jiu-jitsu as heavy metal?
Maybe if I'm on the receiving end, there's a hammer, and there's an anvil, and you get to play a role, and sometimes it's the hammer, and sometimes it's the anvil.
There you go,
Byron. I like that question. Like, what type of music is your jiu-jitsu? That's kind of cool.
Put it in the comments.
Some people might be classical. Some people might be heavy metal. Joe. We go back to Joe talking about the guitar. It was kind of cool way back in the day watching Joe when he was a lead guitarist for the Flock of Seagulls, and that was back when he had hair.
I ran so far away.
I'd like to see you with hair like that, Joe.
Oh, man.
Joe, you do make a good point with your story. Play into your body type. If you've got a body type that is maybe you're short and stocky, you don't invest a ton of time into developing triangle chokes. Maybe you're more of a half guard person or something. I don't know, butterfly guard. I don't know what game matches up with everybody's body types, but try to work with your coach, work with your teammates, find teammates that are, if you're very flexible, you got a teammate that's super flexible who's got a little more experience than you, ask them what they like to do and ask, kind of pick their brain a little bit. Go online and look on YouTube or whatever and see who competes and who's got a similar body type than you. That's playing to that will make it easier. I mean, you could, if you can't touch your toes, which I could basically do right now because I've been working on my flexibility during this coronavirus thing. But if you can't,
8 weeks of practice.
If you can't, maybe you shouldn't be trying to play some super flexible game. That's a factor that you need to consider. If you are not super strong, or maybe you're just really quick, play to that. Make some scrambles happen. Find ways to create scrambles and make that to your advantage.
I will say this, Byron. I'm curious what you think about it. So I've had this guitar for 20 some odd years, and I bought multiple other guitars and had them in the house and played them for a while. And each guitar inspires me in a different way. I think that's typical. So if I play this guitar for 6 months and then put it in a case, and I play a couple others for a year, when I get back to this guitar, I'll still be a better guitarist and I'll be able to play this guitar better because those other guitars inspired me differently. And so if you're a half guard player like I am, if you're a big stocky guy, you like half guard, you like to smash people and do smash passes, it doesn't hurt to explore some of the other games. I agree with Byron that you don't want to waste you don't want to waste a ton of time doing something you're not probably going to be good at. But exploring other things, I think that all builds into the knowledge. And when you get back to your base, when you get back to what's comfortable for you, I think it carries over.
Absolutely. If you're training just that twice a week, probably should be mostly working on your game and getting that sort of thing. But when you're getting lots of time on the mat, and maybe today's more of a recovery day, or maybe today's your day to explore a little bit. Yeah, there's huge value in learning things about jiu-jitsu that you don't even plan on doing, because people are going to do those things to you. It's always nice to be able to reverse engineer it. People are going to want you to teach them stuff sometimes, or hey, what do you know about this? Well, I don't know a lot, but I've messed with it a little bit. Here we go. There's a lot of value to that, I think, Joe. Guys, let's roll our interview with Daniel Maira. Come on down to Jiu-Jitsu Used Auto Sales. That's right, we've got the finest used autos for the Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. We've choked out the high prices. In fact, we've heel-hooked those credit lenders to give you the best possible deal. Do you want a Fred Flintstone car that gives you a great workout before you even show up? We got it. Do you want a van that's wall-to-wall mats and good shocks? We got it. Do you want a bike for the price of a car? Yep, we got it. It even comes in Blue Belt Blue. We even got buses to haul all your youngins to class. At Jiu-Jitsu Used Auto Sale, no payment until your next belt stripe. So come on down and get your next used car from Jiu-Jitsu Used Autos. If you think you hate it now, wait till you drive it. Whoa, hold on, my friends. Put your checkbooks down. Jiu-Jitsu Used Auto Sales isn't our sponsor. They're not even real. I know that's a big shocker. The BJJBrick Podcast is sponsored by the listeners just like you. They're sponsoring us on Patreon. If you could do that, we'd greatly appreciate you. All right, my friends, I'm excited to bring Daniel Maira to the BJJBrick Podcast. Danny, welcome to the show.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Really excited to talk with you today. I've got a whole list of topics I want to cover. We got about an hour here. Tell us a little bit about your start to jiu-jitsu, and then like a brief history about where you are today, if you could wrap that up.
Oh, man. All right. So I started training about 6 years and a couple months ago. And I basically just walked into a gym and just kind of watched the class, and I was like, all right. And then, jumped right in, and then I loved it. And I kind of just quit everything wholesale and basically made it my life. Maybe 3 months into, my career, as it were. So I was like, I was a white belt, and I basically made the decision, like, all right, I'm going to do this full time. And everybody's like, yeah, you're crazy. Like, get out of here. And I had a good job at the time, and, I was doing great. And I just like bailed on everything and just like literally made jiu-jitsu my life and committed to it and making it. I was like, this is going to be my career. And everybody was like, that's not a career. So I was like, all right, we're going to do it. So I just kind of jumped into it there, and I fell in love with it, and I just made it my whole kind of career. And it was something I could kind of help people out with and everything. So after, I don't remember the year, but after, I kind of took my first classes and then trained for a while, and kind of built up, got promoted, blue belt after about 6 months. And man, like I was that guy that when the coach is like, do it this way. And I'm like, well, what about all these other 50 different things that you could do? I was like, are these real? Are they not real? Like, what else could I do? And like, I was always just like experimenting and trying to learn something else. And I just kind of got super addicted to that feeling of learning super quickly and super early. And like, man, that just kind of, it took off from there, and one thing led to the next, and I just kind of never looked back. I'm currently a brown belt under Marcelo Garcia, and still competing and trying to, I guess, just excited to get to the black belt and show everything up there. So,
how old were you when you started?
Oh man, this is I think it was like 21.
Okay.
22. I think it was 21, 22. It was right in there. So kind of late. I did a couple classes.
That was awesome.
I did a couple classes when I was like a little kid. I remember somewhere. And so I had like just enough jiu-jitsu to deal with like your average schoolyard bully when I was a little kid. So maybe like a couple months, whatever. But you can't really like count that. And then I guess that's kind of how I learned about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then came back and actually started training like years later.
So Danny, what was it about you, maybe the time in your life, maybe something in jiu-jitsu that made you decide to jump in, go all in so early on?
For me, 100% the feeling of like seeing a puzzle, trying to solve it, figuring it out, like testing all these other options that don't work, then finding the one that does work and having that aha moment, and then like applying it in a live session, a live role, and making everything click, and it all just comes together, and you're just like, whoa, and you get this like you feel really smart for a second. When you learn a new technique, you apply that new technique, at just the right time, and then it works. And it's almost like a magic trick. If you when I was a little kid, I kind of was into like magic tricks and stuff. And so I'd be like, all right, I'm not all that bright, but I know that if I could pull a magic trick off here and I can fool this person here who I know is pretty smart, then like that kind of makes me smart for a second. So, I'll just keep doing that, I guess. So I kind of got like that feeling of like in that one position, if I know this one thing and I just do it at just the right time, I'm like, ha, fooled you. And, I guess I kind of feel like a little buzz, like, I figured something out. I must be getting smarter. And so I kind of got addicted to that feeling of like learning and just trying to get smarter. And that really kind of evolved into this just scary obsession with just trying to learn as much as possible, like kind of as quick as possible, basically. I was really into chess when I was a little kid, played a lot, and jiu-jitsu is, that whole cliche about like jiu-jitsu being chess, blah, 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 is like scary true, actually. The parallels are it's insane. So for me, like coming from that, kind of being like maybe a nerdy kid, but still like having a lot of kind of fights, like schoolyard type fights when I was real young, kind of, it was like a weird mix, So I was like the nerdy kid, but I could also like kind of throw down if I needed to. And so jiu-jitsu just kind of turned into like the perfect mix of those two.
So is it something in your personality maybe also? Were you like really interested in chess, like you were really interested in jiu-jitsu, or was that a different caliber of interest?
It's hard to tell because I was so young.
Yeah.
But from what I remember of it, which is probably skewed at this point, but from what I remember of it, I was obsessed and I loved it.
Were you competing in chess and that sort of thing?
I did a little bit.
Okay.
I did a little
That's
bit.
Pretty into it.
Yeah. For chess, it's pretty into it. I did a little bit when I was really young, and I just remember like I used to annoy like, my siblings. I would annoy my parents. I would annoy my friends. And then when my friends wouldn't play with me anymore, then I would annoy my friends' parents to play. So I remember I would go over to like my friend's house to like play chess with his dad and try to beat his dad, and ended up doing that more often than not. But, eventually I just kind of ran out of people to play with. And so I just kind of like stopped playing altogether. But I guess it was, I would definitely say I was super into it when I was a kid. It was like just the thing that, I could just see, I could just understand it. It just made sense to me in the way that, math makes sense for a lot of people. It doesn't really make sense to me the same way. And I don't remember maybe numbers and words exactly the same, but I remember these pictures and shapes, and I can recognize these patterns very, very well in comparison. And so when I was put into a task where I had to, recognize those sort of things and put these things together and solve these puzzles, it was like so much fun for me, because I felt like I was like, man, I feel really smart, and it made me, really get hooked on just kind of learning, I guess. So that feeling from chess definitely carried over to jiu-jitsu for me.
I think you said something about 6 months to the blue belt. Are you? I think I saw somewhere you played soccer as well, but are you pretty athletic, like coming onto the mat for the first time, or pretty soon after?
So I would say pretty athletic. I was playing soccer before I started training jiu-jitsu. I was trying to play professionally.
That's that's athletic.
Yeah. I was skinnier. Like, I was definitely, because there was so much running involved and everything. So I was like running around at like probably like 145, 150 maybe. Like I was like, under 150. And, now in jiu-jitsu, it's like I have to cut weight to make featherweight. So definitely a lot less running. But I'm a lot, I've started lifting a little bit here and there, or like, wrestling practice where you're like lifting and picking up people, and like there's a lot more resistance where you're building kind of more muscle through jiu-jitsu training versus soccer training, where my legs are kind of, jacked, but my upper body was pretty skinny. So, I was pretty quick, but I definitely wasn't lifting anything. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I tried to play soccer professionally, and I ended up with a pretty bad knee injury, and I had to have like a come to Jesus talk where I was like, all right, what are you really going to do with your life? Because, if you're really going to do soccer, you have to go all in on this, and you have to do it now. And that means you need to go to this country and spend this much money and live for this long before you have a real shot of actually doing anything. And like that realistic timeline was like quite long, and the chance was quite small, because I'm not exactly the tallest guy. I'm not the strongest. I'm not the fastest. I was always like, I feel maybe just a little bit under the mark for the top level. And so it's like, I kind of had to really have that being realistic conversation with myself, and that kind of one thing led to another, and I said, okay, so do I want to do jiu-jitsu? Do I want to do soccer? Like, what do I want to do for a career? And then obviously, or do I just want to go get a completely different career? So yeah.
Well, Danny, sometimes people will come into jiu-jitsu and they kind of struggle to pick up techniques. They struggle to add them to their game. Like, for example, I don't know, you can show me a sweep or some cool back take, and then I go off and I partner off and try it, and I'm messing it up, and then you re-show me, and I get a little bit of it right, but I'm still wrong a lot of it. Some people, you show up one time, or maybe even some people, they see it, and then they can do it. What's the difference there? Or, like, I imagine you are more of the person who, in the 6 years you've been training, have performed and risen to a very elite level. Like, maybe it's off the mat study that makes it better for you, on the mat performance, or do you feel like just naturally some of it makes more sense to you than other people, or what's happening there, you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that it's both. It's a mix. I would definitely say it's a mix that, you have to be very kinesthetically aware of, how you can move, of your body, of what things feel like, of, the potential for the movements that you have. Like, oh, I know I can twist this way in this position and that way in that position. I understand which way my joints can move and which way they're not supposed to move, and other people's joints, which ways they're supposed to move and which ways they're not supposed to move. So I can, all right, say I'm trying to do an arm bar. I can like just grab an arm if you gave some random person an arm that didn't train and you just said, okay, break this, like they would play with it a little bit and then they would find, the right spot behind the elbow and eventually they would figure out how to break it. Kind of like a twig or something, and so there's a little bit of that, connection where you're figuring out how your body works, the mechanics, the body mechanics of you and everyone that you're interacting with, and how you can apply leverage and force against their joints or their neck or whatnot. And there's also, that will get you to that'll get you to a point that'll take you so far. But I truly believe then you need to understand a lot deeper. And that's where the study comes in, the off the mat potential for movements. So if I was to say, we were talking about chess earlier, so it's like, the body mechanics would be something analogous to if I could make this piece move this way, that piece moves this way, this piece moves that way. And then when you do all the off the mat study and you really learn how it works, you're like, okay, now I can make all of this work for me in this kind of strategy and create these dilemmas for people where, they're kind of, if they go one way, they're screwed. If they go another way, they're also screwed. And then this is what jiu-jitsu is. So you have to be super aware of every potential movement that could happen and have an answer for it. And there's just no way to hold out all that information like in the front of your brain at the right time. It's just like not possible. So you have to do a lot of studying and, helping your brain basically to recognize and recall that information like the second that you need it, because you're only going to need it for like 1 second. It's between this movement here as they're transitioning to that movement right there. It's like, oh, that took about 1 second. Okay, that's your window. So you have like a second where you need to be able to recall that counter for that position and apply it and put your body in the right shape and do it, so there's a little bit of a kinesthetic side to it where you're feeling the position, you're trying to move the right way. And then there's also a side that you have to understand what the right way to move really is. And if you don't have that, I mean, it's going to be, you can get incredibly far with one or the other. But I don't think you're going to make it very far unless you have both. Yeah.
So you do both gi and no gi now, right? Like,
yeah,
competitively,
sure.
Which is impressive. Did you start doing both right away, just from the get go, or did you start off with gi only for a little while?
Definitely did both right away.
Okay.
I just kind of jumped into all of it. You can get that buzz that I was talking about of like, oh, I learned something new, I can apply it. This is awesome. Like, you can get that buzz in gi and you can get it in no gi too. And it's really cool. Personally, I think that the workload in gi is so much more. The workload in no gi is like drastically less. It's so much less that you have to know and learn. And there's so many less options because there's so many less grips you can possibly make. There's like, you can't, and that's not even taking account like the lapel and wrapping that up and tying somebody up with their own pajamas,
So by workload, what you mean, like studying workload?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say like the studying workload. So, all right. So if we say we take guard passing, all right, if I'm going to pass somebody's guard in no gi, it's like, okay, I put them in this one position and I say, okay, there's all these options they can have. And then if I put them in the same position in the gi, they have all those options, no gi, but then they also have all these other options with the grips and with the lapels and with like, there's so much more that could possibly happen. And so in order to learn all those reactions too, it's like you have to do a lot more work. So this is why you see people getting their black belts incredibly quickly, like 3 years or 4 years, 3 or 4 years but they're only training no-gi, like I am a firm believer you could get to a black belt level in no-gi like incredibly fast, but then transferring over to the gi Good luck. It's you're going to do it. It's going to take you a lot longer though. So you can't reach the same level in the gi in that same time period. It's just not, possible because there's so many more variations and grips and options that you could make. So if I'm in De La Riva, for example, in no-gi, I have I'll just throw a number out there. Like I have 10 options. Okay. If I have De La Riva in the gi with the grips, all of a sudden I have 100 options. So it's exponentially greater.
So I'm just trying to compare people who are winning tournaments, I guess.
And I'm talking
the comparison of somebody who wins a gi tournament might have a certain amount more knowledge, and then obviously there's things like speed and timing, all that stuff. But what's the deciding factor in a lot of the no-gi matches then? If there's just so much less technique stuff, is it strategy? Is it timing? Is it what's one of the big deciding factors in no-gi performance?
So in no-gi performance, it's definitely the same concepts, the same ideas, the same principles that govern no-gi jiu-jitsu as they govern gi jiu-jitsu. The difference between the two is just merely that there's more options in the gi and more techniques that can be applied versus no-gi. And the deciding factor really is who is able to recall the perfect counter to that position at the right time and, continue to do this for every adjustment that their opponent makes. So if they move to the left, there's a counter for that. If they move to the right, there's a counter for that. Forward, backwards, up, down, and then, pulling their legs in, pushing them out. There's every reaction that a human can have, they have to have a reaction for it. The difference is, in the gi, all of a sudden, now I can't just go to the left and to the right. I can go to the left with this grip, that grip, this grip, that grip, 20 different grips. I could have a collar grip. I could have a sleeve grip. I could have a pants grip. I could have a lapel grip. I could have all these different grips. And then I could, keep attacking on that side, or I could switch. So there's so many more variations is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Not that no-gi grapplers are worse. That is clearly not the case. It's almost like it's a different sport.
Yeah,
if someone is fully focused on one versus the other, they're going to obviously become far better at one than the other. So if you have, take someone who's an accomplished leg locker, submission only grappler, but can also compete in points. Like Gordon Ryan is a wonderful example, since he's so big in the media. All he had to do really is focus on all the ins and outs of every position that you could get into no-gi, and he has a counter for all of the positions. All the answers are in his brain, and he doesn't need to. He drills them and everything like this, so he doesn't need to have a notebook for it. He just his brain recognizes a shape, and that's the prompt for a certain reaction to pop into his brain, and then he just tries that reaction, and then it just works. If he jumps into the gi, he's not going to get anywhere close to the same level, not even close to the same level of that he's reached in no-gi. The same is true if you take someone else who is a top gi competitor. If they jump into the leg lock scene and everything like this, they can compete, but they're going to have to use a lot more strategy and a lot more maybe anti-jiu-jitsu, where they're going to be staying away from the leg lock game instead of oh yeah, here, let me give you my leg. It doesn't make a difference to me because you're not going to take it. They just don't have the same knowledge of things that are exclusively no-gi because they are training exclusively in the gi. And then you have a lot of people who are going back and forth, myself included.
So what are your goals with competitive jiu-jitsu?
Oh, man, I want to have an answer for absolutely every position that anyone can come up with. I want to have an answer for any position that people put me in competition, and that's basically why I compete. And one of the main driving factors of why I compete is I study as much as possible, and I want to try to solve all these problems. And then when I go compete, if I win, it's like, hey, it worked. If I lose, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, you didn't solve this problem, that problem, this problem. It's like, even when I win, there's a lot of issues that I find. So I'm never like satisfied with a win. I'm always like immediately trying to get back to the drawing board to improve on any mistake that I made or any reaction that could have been better. But I want to be known as one of the greatest Americans to do it. To compete at the black belt level, and eventually I'll get promoted, and eventually I'll be on that black belt scene and kind of tearing it up as much as humanly possible. So
there's kind of a contrasting approach to somebody else's, like defeating somebody in jiu-jitsu. I could come in and let's say you pull some guard on me. I'm unfamiliar with that, and you beat me with that because I couldn't pass it. Versus I know all of the different types of guards, and I have an answer for everything, right? Mm-hmm. The other approach would be you put me in some kind of guard, and I'm, like you said, anti-jiu-jitsu. I kind of back out of it. I backstep a little bit or do something and and reestablish maybe a guard that I am familiar with, that you're playing now. Like I force you to play, I don't know, half guard, or force you to play something else other than the guard that you wanted to, and then I pass that guard. Does that make sense? There's like there's a lot of areas of jiu-jitsu, just because that's not my full-time job, I don't have answers for. So I can't do that style of my knowledge depth isn't anywhere near that deep.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the part where it comes into jiu-jitsu still being a young sport. The professional athletes in jiu-jitsu, I mean, I can't imagine trying to be the top athlete in, say, football or basketball or soccer and not watching tape and not understanding all the movements that the other team is going to make and all the other movements that they're going to try to make and all their plays and all their counters and all that. Like, I can't imagine being a professional athlete and not really taking it seriously and knowing to the upteenth degree everything that can possibly happen. That's, obviously it doesn't happen in reality so perfectly, but that's the goal. It changes when someone's skill is not matched, or let me put it another way, is you can engineer a win. There's a lot of different ways that you can win. Up to a degree. So, for example, you talk about anti-jiu-jitsu. So maybe we go out to the match, we double pull, and then I come up for the advantage. And then I spend the next, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, pretending to pass the guard and really just like breaking grips and disengaging and then diving in, and then breaking grips and disengaging and then diving in. And then maybe I get to pass, probably not, but match ends, time runs out. Oh man, I win on that advantage. It's like, well, I won. I engineered a win. I figured out a plan. I got the win. Okay, great. The same thing could be true as if I pull guard and they stay standing, and then I almost sweep them. But instead of coming up, I just sit back down. And then I almost sweep them. And instead of coming up, I sit back down. And I just start racking up advantages this way. This is another way that you can kind of engineer a win. There's many different ways that you can engineer a win. So if, for example, maybe I'm going to go compete against somebody who is ahead of me. I'm still, figuring out a certain position, and I know that they're super good at that position. All right, well, for the competition, I have to win that match. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to stay away from that position because I understand if we get there, they're going to beat me. So I try to stay away from that position. However, it's my job, my goal in training, and it's my job as a professional athlete that everything that I do in training is so that any situation that we get into in the competition, I'm the guy that knows what to do. And I'm never put into a spot where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do. How do I react to this? If I'm put into a spot where I go, I don't know what to do, how do I react to this? Then I messed up. Not in the competition, but I seriously messed up in my training for the months and months and months leading up to it. So I feel there's a big discrepancy there between the actual levels of competitors. If ultimately the goal would be to make the gap so large that you could go out, pull guard, not need all the You don't need to engineer a win because you can actually just attack and submit them every match. And so ultimately the goal is to, but that's incredibly difficult to do at the top level. But the goal should be to separate the gap so large that even on a horrible day when nothing goes your way, the refs screw you over, the other guy's really tactically sound, he's very intelligent with his game plan, and you go out there and you can still put him away. That's how far you need to widen the gap to win at the top level. So then when you look at the guys who are truly at the top level, they all have done that. And so now they compete with each other, and then it goes back to strategy and needing to engineer the win because they haven't made the gap so far yet between the top 1% of the top 1%. Like the gap isn't as big up there for those people. So then the strategy and everything kind of comes back into play. But there's many different ways that you can engineer a win, different game plans and strategies. And it's definitely something that, a lot of people, they'll get to a point with their technique and their study in jiu-jitsu, and they say, I have a system that's working for me, and I can win matches with this. And then they just use the strategy and the tactics to win matches with this, and so they don't continue to keep learning, and that's one way you can go about it. And then at that point they say, well, everybody's got the same, so whoever's the most athletic wins. It's like, well, yeah, that's one way you can go about it. But I believe that has a ceiling on it because you can always find somebody else who's just as athletic, and someone who, can study and really break down every position. They're not relying on strength, so they just rely on the positioning. And so if the positioning is correct, the beauty of jiu-jitsu is you're going to win, at least in that position. If you mess up in another position, you'll lose that position, but you have to take it like position by position basis and reaction by reactions.
Danny, how do you deal with a loss? What's your process in that?
I have a philosophy that's maybe a little bit different, but I think everybody kind of they relate to it. Where if you look at say those infomercials for example, like, hey, pay $5 a day and you can save this hungry, starving child in Africa, right? You can feed a hungry, starving child in Africa, something like this. It's a very kind of common thing. Or like people, you see war on the TV and horrible situations around the globe, and just the political scene, everywhere basically. You just see all the injustice in the world, and people go, oh my goodness, that's horrible. And then they just go on looking at their news feed and eating their dinner and laughing at silly cartoons and cat videos or whatever. And if someone doesn't really care about that poor little starving child in a war-torn country, and they're willing to just be like, yeah, whatever, and they can actually like live with themselves just going back and eating their dinner, obviously you can't help everybody, and it is what it is. But if they don't care about that kid, like they don't truly care about that kid, why do they care about some athlete doing jiu-jitsu? So if I lose, it's not like everyone's going to hate me and my life is going to be over and no one's going to, talk to me ever again. And I'm a failure on every, front, and, just everything horrible and my world is going to fall apart. It's like, okay, even if that was true, you're still way better off than that poor starving child in that war-torn country. And just no matter how bad your situation is, there's literally always someone worse. It's like no matter how big of a fish you are, there's always a bigger fish. And if you have that mentality, I feel it's incredibly difficult to be like, oh, poor me. So the only logical thing to do next is like, well, do you really enjoy doing this? And, for me, the answer is always yes. And that's why, I always remember why I did it in the first place. And it's because I love that feeling of learning. So the next logical thing for me to do is just immediately be like, okay, well, what can we learn from this? How can I take, the techniques, the tactics, the attitude, the mindset, whatever it was that went into this competition? How can I take all those into account and write them all down, type them up, whatever it is, and learn from it. Maybe I have to make these adjustments, those adjustments, learn this position. Man, I didn't even know you could do that position. I remember I got armbarred my first year as a purple belt at the World Championships. In my first match, I had never felt so good. I was never more prepared for a match, I felt at the time. I was super flexible. I was in great shape. I had a cool gi. I was like, man, I'm winning this for sure. And like, I get armbarred from 50-50 with like a straight armbar. And it's because I posted my hand on the mat right next to the guy's head. Like, I had no idea that technique even existed. I just didn't know. And so that was like a really dark point for like, that was a really long, like 3 minutes. And I was like, man, like, what is going on? Did I pick the right career? I thought I was going to win. Like, I really, believe that. And so, only a couple minutes later, I'm like, dude, I didn't even know that position was real. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, well, what else don't I know? I thought I knew it. I thought I was good. And clearly that wasn't the case. And so I just started learning as much as possible and studying as many positions as possible, so that never happened again. And of course, it happened many, many more times after that. And so I had to learn many, many different positions, and I still am. And I'm constantly trying to learn positions and then the details of each position and the kind of meat and potatoes of what makes the position actually work against the top level guys. Like when just them rotating their knee outward a little bit changes the whole, game. So
Danny, what the armbar story is interesting. What do you do with a technique or position that you see for the first time and you see that it's effective? And so how do you study that? How do you learn about that? Do you have a way that works best for you to learn about something new?
For a new technique or?
Yeah, a new technique or new position or whatever. Just something that's unfamiliar with.
Yeah, if it works, I need to know it. If it works, I need to know it. If it's, we kind of brainstorm it right away. Nick Salas and I are, roommates, and we literally will spend hours just brainstorming positions and figuring things out and studying them. And then we'll scrub matches trying to find like, oh, wait, here's that situation that we're brainstorming in a live match at the top level. And, we'll see how it panned out. And then we'll be like, well, what if he did this? Well, what if he went that way? Well, what if he went up like this or put his weight back like this? And so we play with the situation like that. And we'll really figure out if it does work or if it doesn't work. If it works, we keep it. We'll drill it and, we'll practice it and we'll use it in the competition. If it doesn't work and we can't make it work, we can't figure it out, and we haven't seen anybody at the top level be able to make it work, then we just don't waste our time with it. We just kind of throw it in the trash. And there's a lot of techniques out there on, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, that are, people who think that it works, but, who are they testing it against? It's like, well, they're testing it against, each other in a gym setting that they're not the top athletes in the world. They don't react the same. They're, it's just not the same. And so it's very easy to fall under the illusion that it works. So you got to check it at the top level. And if you don't have, if you can't find a situation where it happens at the top level, then you have to really dive deep and make sure that every reaction is covered. So every reaction that the opponent can give you in that time, it's covered. If that's all covered and it's all logical and all adds up, then it'll work. Probably. The next best thing is to have top, level athletes and test it on them and then ask them about it and then run it by them and then try it on them and stuff like this. And, we found, many techniques don't hold up under pressure, and then many other techniques do, and we keep them. I had a technique that I would use from the top. I call it the Gunslinger, where it's basically I take the lapel and I cross it to the far hip and I reach underneath that leg and I grab the lapel, and it's incredibly good for keeping a base, and I have a whole system off of it that I use for passing and dives. But it started off as a way to counter the Bolo. in the double guard pull because I was getting just annihilated in the double guard pull and I didn't understand what to do. So I was like trying to figure the problem out, and I came up with this thing, and it was working on everybody. I was a purple belt, and it worked on everybody up to purple belt. It worked on black belts and brown belts in the gym. It worked on everybody I could try it on. I was like, oh, this is great. And then I went and trained with Mikey Musumeci. And he was like, why would you do that? And I explained the whole thing, this and that. And he goes, why can't I just like take your back though? And I was like, well, because my knee is here and it's blocking and this and that. And his understanding of the Berimbolo was so much higher than anything I had even come into contact with that I was like, I didn't understand that was even a thing. Okay. So I literally had this whole system that I've been working on for like months and months and months. And I used it in competitions, and it was even maybe a year or two at that point. And, Mikey Musumeci just destroyed it and threw it in the trash in like maybe 2 minutes. And I was like, get out of here. And so then we rolled obviously, and I kept trying it on him, and he kept taking my back. And it was so obvious at that point that something that he knew as common knowledge, I had not even considered. And so because of this, I threw maybe at the time, 80% of that technique in the trash. And I was like, okay, well, all of this is complete trash and doesn't work now, but it's really good to just stay on top and base, So then I was like, okay. So I just kind of used it for that for a little while. And then I started developing options I could do off of this position. So it's just something I kind of keep in my back pocket now. If I need to, pull it out in a competition or a certain situation, I can use this thing that, I made up that no one else knows. And so they don't know how to counter it and they don't know how to beat it. And, that's a situation where I ran it by somebody at the top level, and he goes, well, this part of it works. This part of it, not so much. So you always have to be willing to throw in the trash. There's kind of a saying, I can't remember who says it, but somebody was like, if you don't blow your business up, the market will blow it up for you. And that's kind of like the same thing with your jiu-jitsu techniques. It's like if you don't blow your jiu-jitsu techniques up, the competition will blow it up for you. And you'll have all this belief in something, but it's not like battle tested, and you haven't really figured everything out and covered your bases, and so you're going to get burned probably. So I was very thankful that Mikey helped me out. He's the man. But I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting time in your grappling career. I had a similar moment. Not quite as dramatic as one person made me change my idea about a thing like Mikey did.
It was like the most brutal 2 minutes.
Yeah. Not only was it not working for you, you were realizing that all the hard work you put into this was nothing, almost nothing.
Mikey's like a super genius too, though, to be fair. Mikey is the Bobby Fischer or the Magnus Carlsen of jiu-jitsu. He's next level. So if anybody was going to figure it out, it was going to be him.
Yeah. I remember when I had to throw away, I've done it a couple times, I guess. Back, it was probably around 2006. I was a purple belt, and I played a lot of rubber guard, and I was having a great time with it, submitting a lot of blue belts, purple belts, and white belts, but never even getting close to anybody who was more skilled than me. I played that for over a year, and I finally figured out I'm not tapping out anybody better than me ever. Not even putting them in danger. It's like I think I put this on the shelf, and maybe it works for some people. It wasn't working for me,
That's
and
awesome.
I just had to move on.
I had almost the same experience with with rubber guard at blue belt. White belt, blue belt, all I played was rubber guard, and I competed as much as possible. It was a lot. It was just an obnoxious amount, and it was just rubber guard, rubber guard, rubber guard, rubber guard, and I was doing really, really well, but same thing. I would never beat anybody who was the next belt up or whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm missing something here then. So
yeah. And I don't know why in particular, but it's the answer is just to move on to something else.
Yeah. The answer to that question is really what reaction are they giving you? So you get the closed guard. You get the closed guard, and they're staying tight, whatever, and they're allowing you to hike your hips up and control their posture and lock the rubber guard in. And they don't understand how to react to the rubber guard. The rubber guard works. It's incredibly effective. The problem is when someone knows how to deal with the rubber guard and counter the rubber guard and pass the rubber guard, now it's not effective. So you need a different guard. Or you need to know how to deal with every reaction that they can give you. And, I dove pretty deeply into the rubber guard reactions that they could give. And eventually it was just kind of like I found easier options that I enjoyed more. But there's a few athletes that have made it work at a very high level, but I don't believe it's possible to only have rubber guard and make it work at the top level. I don't believe that it's possible to only have like collar sleeve and make it work at the top level. You have to have a little bit of everything. You can have one guard that stands out more than everything else, but you can't exclusively be a rubber guard player and expect to succeed at the top level. You can't exclusively be a close guard player and succeed at the top level. You can use those at the top level, but only in conjunction with everything else that you have. And if you're threatening enough with everything else, then you can make it work.
Has it been an advantage to you to always kind of be learning and changing a little bit to where if we compete one year and I eke out a victory on you, or no, let's say you beat me that year and we compete again next year, I'm expecting the Danny I saw last time and the Danny that's on the mat this time is playing a different game entirely, or is changed 30% of his game or 40% of his game. Oh, that's a pretty big advantage, I would think, as far as me not knowing really what to train for.
It's worse than that. It's not like this competition and then the next time I compete, I'm different and I'm doing new things. It is literally an obsession to the point that like when I train with, my training partners, when I train with Gianni Grippo, when I'm training with Nick Salas and Marcus and, when I'm training with my training partners, the next day, if I am still reacting the same way, then I seriously messed up. Give me a few hours. Give me, and I'll have to break it down. Say we're playing De La Riva,
okay,
and I'm trying to pass the De La Riva guard, right? And then I just get absolutely murked in the De La Riva position. All right, training's over. I lost. I got beat up. Or maybe I didn't even lose, but I just couldn't win. Okay, time to figure it out. And I'll sit there and I'll rack my brain about it as much as possible, and I'll come up with like a bunch of different options. All right. Then the evening training session comes by. I go back. I'll train with the same people. I'll walk right into that same position, and I'll be like, again, this is training. This isn't competition. I'm not going to just walk into that in the competition, but I'll walk right into it in the training, and I'm going to try like a different option. That doesn't work. Now I got another option just in case that one didn't work. Next one didn't work. Next one didn't work. Next one, and so on and so on and so forth. Then I figure out what does work, and I throw away the rest. And now, in a span of, a day or a week, like I'm dealing with the position a completely different way, and it'll work. And if it doesn't work, it does. It'll work. If they switch the position, basically, then I have to do the same thing all over again to another position. If they don't respond, then I just beat them with the answers that I found. And sometimes you'll get this with training partners that don't evolve their games, and they'll train. And then, a lot of times, like hobbyists are a perfect example, which is like almost everybody who trains. Some of my favorite training partners, some of my best training partners are people who have a family, they have a real job, they have they have to go to work after training or whatever. And, they react when we come back the next day, they're reacting the same way in that position. And I'm already doing like 20 new things. And if they continue to react the same way, then I'll just continue to beat them in that position. So the only option for them to do is to, really learn how to counter the reaction that I figured out and build off of that. So then I'll beat them, and then they'll beat me, and back and forth and back and forth. What I like to do is because I understand too, especially some of my good friends that I train with, they have real jobs and they're not full-time, jiu-jitsu competitors. This isn't what they do for a living. And so they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's great and all, but I don't have time to dedicate my entire life to just learning these positions. Like, that's a little nuts. This is my job. This is my career. I'm a professional athlete, and this is literally what I have to spend all my time on. And this is what I choose to do, and this is what I do. So I have two options there. I can just beat them, and then I can like kind of feel good about myself. I'm like, yeah, I beat that position. And then I can just leave them to their own devices, and maybe they'll figure it out after a while, maybe not. But even if they do, it'll take a while. Or I can just tell them and be like, here, try this when I do that. That's how you beat me. And then sure enough, they'll try it. And I'm like, well, crap, that's annoying. So now I have to go back, and the whole cycle starts all over again. And it's really frustrating in training because I do really good and I do really bad, and then I do really good and then I do really bad. But it's wonderful in competition, because if you compete against me and then see you like a month later, like literally it's not even going to be close to the same person. So if I fought myself from 3 months ago, I would demolish myself. So we're in kind of this quarantine time right now with the coronavirus pandemic going on, and everybody's quarantining and this and that. And, I'm just studying jiu-jitsu like crazy, drilling for hours on end with Nick. And, we're lucky to kind of, be roommates and quarantine together. But like just before the quarantine till now, my entire game, I feel like, has completely changed. It's like, and the gap is like, the gap from before the quarantine till now, it's hard to fathom, how far it is, but I would say something like a blue belt to a brown belt gap. Like there's that much of a gap between the two. Yeah. And that's in like 2 months, not like I'd say about 2 months, so it's just hard for me to imagine not approaching the problems in this way, because it would take all the fun out of it, but also it would take any effectiveness out of jiu-jitsu as well.
Yeah. I think I have I approach them. I like your other answer is I just ask the person, like, let's just say you just slice through my guard. I'll just ask you. I'll say, hey, what was that? How can I stop that from happening? What did I do wrong?
So imagine if I'm trying to be a chef, I can literally fumble my way around a kitchen and throw things together, and I might stumble upon a great recipe, or I could just read a cookbook or watch the Food Channel, or ask someone who is actually a chef and knows, and they can just teach me. So what happens there is they're spending all their time, their energy into building these skills, right? And I value those skills. So I'm going to pay them probably to teach me how to cook, because that's what I want. I want to know how to cook. It's like, well, how bad do you want to, so you kind of go down that road, but they've done all the time. They've done all the experimentation. They've made all the mistakes. So I'm basically paying them not to teach me a recipe. I'm paying them for all the years of work that led up to that moment, of all the knowledge that they've kind of acquired, and the list of recipes that they have and everything like that. That's really what I'm after. I'm kind of shortcutting the process of learning because they're helping me. And it's the same in jiu-jitsu. A good coach, that's exactly what they're doing. And a good coach is, worth their weight in gold, I feel. Because if they're applying all of their time and energy and everything into studying these techniques, so that all you have to do is show up to class and just ask a question and short circuit the entire trial and error, sciencing the crap out of it to figure out, a body positioning. It's like, you mean I don't have to do any of that? I can just ask a guy? Sign me up.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel when I train with Mikey Musumeci. I'm just using him as an example because we were talking about him earlier. But if I had access to, and I really do actually, with Marcelo and everybody, if we just ask a question, he just gives us the answer. It's like, oh, it's nice. Sometimes you can just short circuit the process. A lot of the brainstorming is done away from Marcelo's and actual school. So I don't really get to brainstorm questions with people too much. But, I did with Mikey Musumeci for a little bit, with Gianni Grippo sometimes, with Nick Salas a lot, because, we're training kind of quarantine together.
Yeah.
But yeah, with everybody, with all my coaches and friends and training partners, and I'll ask them things, and a lot of times I can just short circuit the training process or the learning process on a lot of these moves. And a lot of them I have to go and study, and I got to figure out all the ins and outs on my own. And it's a long, tedious process. But eventually one day when I have my own school, I can offer that to people where they don't have to, study 101 different matches to figure out, this little detail about having your knee pinched inward or something like that. It's like, I can just tell you.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of most of us, like myself, that are not serious competitors, or this is something that I've been doing for fun, and so I could always just ask my coach, or I could always just find you online or Jonathan Thomas online and just like learn right from there. Like the answers for the vast majority of us are already figured out. It's the top level people who are trying to answer these new problems or find solutions that are out there.
Yeah.
That's not for you guys to do. That's hard work. It's an arms race.
And that's something that you kind of talked about earlier, where you were like, well, I just don't have, like, as a hobbyist, I just don't, I do jiu-jitsu because it's fun and this and that. I just don't have the time to study every variation that there is. And the fact of the matter is, you're right. But if you have a good coach, you can short circuit that process and just kind of cut to the mustard.
Yeah. And sometimes a good coach just points you in the right direction. Like they may not have all the answers either. They might say, hey, talk to him about this or talk to her. I want to be respectful of your time, but we're getting up there. Okay. Danny, where can somebody get a hold of you, follow you? You got a podcast going on. Give us some information about how to keep up with you.
Yeah, so Nick Salas and I have a podcast that we have just started. It's called the Bolo Bros Podcast. It's basically Nick and I, and we just talk about jiu-jitsu, travels, different life experiences, different life lessons, mindsets, whatever. Just different ways we can kind of spread positivity and help some people in the jiu-jitsu community or maybe even outside. And give them some new perspective on some things and hopefully make them laugh a little bit in the process. We have an Instagram page called the Bolo Bros Podcast on Instagram, where we are doing interviews with, top athletes and, getting their perspective on things and their advice on different questions. And it's been really nice to connect with some of these people, but really kind of shine a light on some of these people that are helping other people as well, and being good role models and everything. We believe that's super important, and that's something we wanted to kind of put out there and give people value. And so we post tutorials on there. We'll post all types of stuff. So give that a follow at Bolo Bros Podcast on Instagram, and it's the Bolo Bros Podcast is on iTunes and Podbean and Spotify and everything else. Yeah.
Cool, man. I really enjoyed talking with you today, and look forward to following the podcast there and having you back on the future sometime.
Man, thank you so much. Yeah, the time went super quick. I love talking about jiu-jitsu. This is awesome. So,
yeah,
so much for having me on, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely, it's been fun. I want to thank Danny for hopping on here and sharing some of his story and really what brought him to jiu-jitsu. A very interesting story. I don't think I know most people don't have the similar thing to where you decide very early on that jiu-jitsu, you're going all in. Like the quote of the day is be all in or be all out. Don't like that's for some people. It's not for me, but Danny saw jiu-jitsu, really enjoyed the challenges behind it, and decided to go all in. And he's the type of person, follow him on social media and keep up with him. I love watching these brown belts who are really good make that transition to black belt and just surprise people and come out and those first couple of years at black belt level is really fun for me as a fan to watch that and make that leap, because it is a leap. The problem with the black belt division is everybody who was like Danny as a brown belt is still there and they're waiting for him. Everybody who had amazing brown belt careers are there waiting, and they're ready, and they present different challenges to him. And he's, man, interviewing him and Nick back to back was awesome, and that's going to be the next week's interview. So I really enjoyed talking with both of them.
Byron, I got a question for you.
Sure.
So you've interviewed a ton of competitors, a ton of black belts. I come from a pretty large family, and five of my siblings went straight from high school to college. And for two of them, they had a really big culture shock. They did so well in high school because they were just really smart. It came really easy. And then they got to high school or college, it was just really difficult. Do you see that in the people you interview, the people you talk to? Do you see any of that?
Like going from brown belt to black belt?
They go from brown belt and they're at the top. They've been at the top of the heap for so long. They were the best purple belt. They were the best brown belt. And then they become a black belt, and it's like, shit, this is really hard. There's a lot of really good people here.
I think one thing that might buffer against that is the fact that they're always training with black belts.
Yeah.
So there's
okay.
That's I mean, Danny's training with Nick, and Nick's a great brown belt as well. But like, they're getting a lot of mat time in with really good black belts, but they're different. Everybody brings something different to the table. So once they get to that division and they see, last year's champ, standing across the mat from them, that's going to be different. Yeah. But I think that it's expected to be tough. I think so. I struggled in high school. I had very little motivation to do well in high school. I don't remember, it was long enough ago that I just didn't really put it together and get fired up about school. And when I went to college, I'm like, this costs money. I need to figure out what to do with my life. Like, let's study and do good at this. And it wasn't that hard for me because it seemed like I just decided I was going to put effort into it. And I hadn't done that before. So I think if I was used to doing well in high school I didn't do well in high school. I'm one of those guys. My little effort got me little results. But if I had tried hard or done, not tried that hard in high school and then came to college and tried to do the same approach, I think I would have struggled. But I knew I was going to be tough. I knew I was going to be pushed. And I got really good grades in college. So I think that's similar. Like, these guys know those black belts are really good, and they don't want to beat a black belt. They want to win in that division, like beat everybody that day, or over those couple days. That's different than just wanting to eke out a victory over a black belt that's top 10. They want to be number one. So I think that
I guess I was going to say, I think you hit it on the head. I think that's key, is knowing that it's going to be tough, knowing that you have to ratchet it up. I think that like my siblings that did well in high school and then were surprised in college, I don't think it was that they weren't capable of doing the work. I think it just surprised them. They weren't anticipating that there would be that big step up. What you're saying is that in jiu-jitsu, you see that.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, about the competitor at a little older of an age. Like, if you're a 38-year-old brown belt, when you get your black belt, you can be suddenly competing against guys that have been a black belt for 10 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the step up on the competitive stage would be pretty steep.
That's true. But manage your expectations, and that first step up is probably going to be a learning experience. The second step up, you just have to work up to it. I don't know if having the goal of, I'm going to go out there and win worlds in a year and a half or whenever it is, and then don't compete until the world's like, I should probably compete every month if that's my goal.
Sure, yeah. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you learn, tournament after tournament after tournament after tournament.
But these guys like Danny and Nick, they are so goal driven. They, like Byron said, they're full-time jiu-jitsu people and very high level jiu-jitsu people. Like, it's a special athlete to be in that situation, So these guys, they're, as we said earlier, they're all in it. They are going to learn, from each loss. They got a very strong mental preparation. I don't know. It just seems like the people in their situation are unbreakable. They're just a different type of human being to get to that level. Not everybody can get to that level. I don't think you could took me at their age and train me, even if I trained all day long, to get to that level. It's unique individuals very strong mentally, very open to learning. Don't dwell on losses. Treat losses as a time to prepare. A chance to get better, and come back the next one and learn. And I just think that people like that, the step up is going to be tough. It's always going to be tough, but they're ready for that challenge and they embrace it. And I think if you come at it with that mentality like they have, that they're gonna do well. If you're doing well as a brown belt and you did well as a purple belt, you're gonna do well.
Yeah, and I really like how Danny and Nick are approaching this quarantine thing. Yeah, they're fortunate; they're roommates, so they're able to technically train and not technically train the techniques of jiu-jitsu. And yeah, they could train, they could roll if they want to, but they're really expanding their knowledge base and getting to know more jiu-jitsu. But I think we all need to consider this, and I don't know how long it's going to go, and it depends where you are probably, but in jiu-jitsu, we don't have an off season. Sure, there's no gi time for Worlds and no gi time for Worlds or whatever, but in reality, we just train year round, and there's really a lot of benefits to that. Constant training, and we don't quit in the summertime. That doesn't make any sense, but there are some advantages. Hot, yeah, it would be if we have air conditioning, but there are some advantages.
No wonder Byron's getting better faster than us, Gary.
He told us that the season was only 3 months long, and and because of the rules, we weren't allowed to train during the other 9 months. Jeez, he fooled us, Joe.
Yeah, that paid off. That's been paying off for years.
Yeah.
But we should just think about this as the off season, and you could any sport. If you did sports in back in the day or back in school, there was an off season, and most students or most off
football now in the off season.
That's one thing. You do something else, you get in really good shape. Like a lot of guys would do. I've interviewed some people who were baseball players, and they would, or I don't remember, maybe football, and they would do wrestling in the off season for the conditioning. And then they actually liked wrestling, and they quit their other sport and they wrestled it. I don't remember who that was, but man, wrestling is crazy good for endurance and strength building and balance and speed, all that stuff. So although we can't train jiu-jitsu like we would like to, this is our off season, and you could literally take the time off and do other things, or you could focus on some other area physically, mentally, whatever, and develop as a martial artist there.
Like Byron, you're working your flexibility, and I'm doing it also, and I can tell you during this COVID time, my flexibility is shot through the roof. I have really, in numerous areas, gained some flexibility, and I think this is something that's going to keep me on the mats longer. And not only that, it's going to help my jiu-jitsu game. The more flexible I am, the better. But also, Joe, I want to bring up the point. Byron's telling us there's an off season now. So what he's trying to do now, and to pick up another sport in the off season. Now he's hoping we'll pick up pickleball and we'll never come back to jiu-jitsu, so he'll be better than us. So, Joe, let's not fall for that one.
Nope. I ain't playing with anybody's pickles and balls.
Oh, man.
That's where I draw the line.
We just ask that you keep an open mind, my friend. We have an article of the week, 5 off-season training tips for wrestlers.
Off-season, I like it.
Off-season, yep. And we'll put a link to the article in the show notes. But regardless of any of the tips, really think of this as the off-season for jiu-jitsu. And when you walk back into those doors to go train jiu-jitsu, if that's in a few days, a few months, or next year, who knows when it's going to be, you could come into there like you've been doing nothing for that time. You can come in there in great shape. And I think don't waste that opportunity to add a little bit of strength, add a little bit of endurance, add the flexibility, study. If you normally train, let's just say, let's stick with this 2 times a week. So what is that? Probably 3 to 4 hours. You should be working on jiu-jitsu stuff 3 or 4 hours. It could be studying, you could be, doing something like that and continuing to develop. It will pay off. The off season will end at some point in time, my friends. This article recommends strength training 3 times a week. Does that seem reasonable, guys?
I think even when you're training jiu-jitsu, but in the off season, or as we call it, coronavirus pandemic, three times a week is reasonable. 5 times a week is good if you're not hitting it too hard.
Well, I was the same thing. I was thinking 3 times was too little. But I do see, I guess I talked to a wrestling performance specialist, Steve Preston, and he said that wrestlers that strength train 4 to 6 days per week make less progress compared to those who reduce their frequency to 3 times a week.
Man, that's smart training.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to make more progress. And, I mean, with the strength training, your body needs time to recover. That's when you build muscles. And, 3 times a week strength training. There's so many different things you could do from home. If you don't have access to the gym, you could still strength train at the house.
How about dynamic warm-ups? Byron, you've been doing some of those?
I'm not the best at warming up. I'm more of a dynamic workout. No, there's definitely... So the idea of the static warm-ups, I think, is what they're trying to advocate over. And that's really what I learned as a young person in school, is the static warm-ups, or to stretch and hold it or whatever.
Yeah, so as I get older, man, I just find that warm-ups are really important, and I would agree 100%. So if I'm going to do a workout, I'll probably spend 10, 15 minutes, and I'll do shoulder rotations forward and back. My shoulders are really bad, so I'll warm those up. I'll stretch them out a little bit. I'll work on my hamstrings, but like you said, Byron, I won't just bend over as far as I can and hold it for 30 seconds or so. I'll bend over, I'll straighten up, and then I'll stretch one hand up over to my left side and then go over to my right side, alternating and keep moving. And if I do 15 minutes of that before a workout, my workout is much better.
Yeah, I have received less injuries once I switched over to dynamic warm-ups, doing squats, side squats. I like that lunges with a twist. Yep. Where before I would just, do a little back stretch, do, a hamstring stretch. And I had a guy who's a personal trainer helping me because I was getting hurt, and he recommended that, and it made the biggest difference. And I feel like, I've had a lot less injuries, and really helped me out.
Yeah, another thing this article talks about is a diet and maintaining a healthy diet. So they have a guy, sports nutrition expert, Matt Pykowski. I'm going to go with that. Pykowski. Matt Pykowski. And he says quite a bit in here, but really, it's this time of year. This is a quote here. It's this time of year provides a great opportunity for wrestlers to focus on gaining muscle, improving strength, endurance, quickness, and agility by following a balanced nutrition and training program without the stress of trying to make weight for competition. And I would also add in there, without the stress of rolling for 45 to 60 minutes every day. Like, rolling 60 minutes every day is not necessarily what you could do if you were trying to gain some muscle or improve your strength, because you don't want to, if you lift weights and then go train, you're not going to train super great. And if you go train and then lift weights, you're not going to lift weights super great either. So sometimes these are kind of a hindrance on each other. But he's really advocating for wrestlers. This is the time. Gain muscle, improve strength, endurance, quickness, agility. All these things are ready. This is the time to make those be better. And do that at this point in time. And of course, your diet is a big impact on your ability to increase these. Talks about high-quality proteins, fruits and vegetables, the complex carbohydrates, that sort of stuff.
Byron, I think when I think about sports that have seasons, I think there's some advantages to that. And I think for high level competitors in jiu-jitsu, there may be some advantage to having not a period of time where you don't do jiu-jitsu, but this is my competitive stretch where I'm really focused on competition, and this is my recovery or off season, or however you want to word it. You're talking about diet. For a wrestler, their season usually runs from about October to the spring, which covers the winter holidays. For a jiu-jitsu athlete, a grown-up, a dad or a mom, it's convenient maybe to have what you would call your off season over the holidays, which is the worst time. So paying attention to your diet when you are not on the mats as much. I'm stepping on my own toes here, but that's probably really important. Eat right.
Yeah, and the other benefit or reason to eat right now versus later is if you're not hitting other areas as far as fitness hard right now, you don't have that same engine burning all that fuel and calories you're putting into it. So it's just got nowhere to go. Like if you're going and you're training hard for 2 hours, you could probably have a candy bar on the way to do that, or something. Like you're going to burn through that pretty quick. But if you're watching, YouTube videos about sewing or whatever hobby it would be, you're going to have a tough time burning that candy bar.
What if I'm watching YouTube videos about jiu-jitsu? Do I burn more calories?
You might. Maybe a little increased heart rate.
Yeah. Yep. I think I read something. If you watch an action movie, you will burn more calories. You probably get your heart rate up.
That's my new workout plan.
Yeah. But check that article. Like Byron said, we got a link to it in the show notes. It's from blog.gtmsportswear.com. 5 off-season training tips for wrestlers. And Byron, in that article, you were talking about YouTube videos and stuff like that. But, hey, don't forget to check out the BjjBrick YouTube. Byron's got some good stuff on there and actually just posted one this week. Byron, what was that one about?
Yeah, well, I am constantly flooded with people who just are having a hard time purchasing gi shorts or no gi shorts. It's like, I do no gi, but I can't afford to buy these $40 pair of shorts. I don't know. And so I came up with a solution that's going to just really make a big change and help the entire grappling community.
Yeah, so he doesn't want to give too much
I
out.
give it away.
Yeah,
I make a pair of no gi shorts. Were you guys impressed? Have you seen it?
Actually, I had to turn away when the shorts were totally done.
They were not only functional, but they were stylish. And I mean, Byron, I really think you could, get a line going here, and you can make some money at this. So,
well,
at least from the modeling end.
Well, that's never been said about me before.
But it doesn't really make sense. You're saying people are having trouble buying no-gi shorts, and you're ruining a pair of gi pants.
Well, we all have lots of gi pants laying around.
So I wonder if you could just do no-gi and gi pants.
We did have...
That doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense. I mean, a guy like Eddie Bravo who just does no-gi and wait.
Yeah. Well, Jason Quint actually wrote in, and he wanted to know about, could you also do that with a pair of jeans, Byron?
Yeah, so I'm just thankful that we have a nice group of people there on the Facebook page, because then frankly chimed in and said he once tried to grapple in jean shorts and he was stuck to the mat. There was so much friction with that denim material. So don't recommend making jean shorts to grapple in. Make them out of gi pants. And I really help you guys out. Like, first, you go ahead and you make the cut, and then you measure to see if the cut's the same length. Most people would have not done that way, but that's the correct way to do it. You cut first, and then you measure, and then you have to cut again. That's the way to do things, Gary.
But wouldn't you then have to cut like 3 or 4 times, and then your pants would end up kind of short?
Well, you just have to check the video out to see how it turns out.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just say the wife is not allowing me to wear these in public. Yep. Although the internet is kind of public, so maybe I'll start wearing them.
Well, Byron, I also got another. Somebody just watched it right now. One of our listeners.
Oh, sure. Yes, here comes the real thing.
And he just sent me a message like, "How did you lose your sleeves on your shirt in the middle of it?" He didn't see any cutting happening there, but all of a sudden you didn't have any sleeves on your shirt.
Sometimes when I have scissors, I just get carried away. I mean, that's
okay.
If you noticed, I require a box of Band-Aids as well, and a tasty snack.
Gary, what you don't see is you don't see the back of the shirt, which is split right down the middle because he flexed. What he did is he flexed, and it split the back of the shirt open. It ripped the sleeves off. So he just pulled the sleeves off.
Makes sense.
Just pulled the sleeves off and finished the video.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to last week's episode. Byron has really been doing a lot of Turkish get-ups and chin-ups. So, man, it's really working. He flexed and split the back and lost his sleeves. So, congratulations, Byron.
Well, thank you. That really means a lot to me.
And he's getting more flexible at the same time.
It's all coming together for me. So, if this will make a lot more sense if you watch the video. Just type in no-gi shorts homemade, and it probably pops up, or how to make no-gi shorts. Shouldn't be that competitive of a search thing.
You never know. There could be a couple of them.
Well, anyway, when I put these shorts on, I'm going to always work out really hard, and I'm going to stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train in shorts, and get better, guys. We'll see you on the mats.
Now you have to watch the video.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can visit our website at BjjBrick.com for more good times. Swing by and like our Facebook page. Our email is BjjBrick@gmail.com.